grade 10. So today we're going to be learning about the quadratic formula, which is another way to find the zeros when we can't factor or when we can't think of the two numbers that would work to factor. So you should print the handout on Teams and fill it in as you watch this video. So at the top of your handout there, you'll have what looks like this, a box that says key ideas. And there it says parabolas can have 2 zeros, 1 zero, or no zeros. The zeros can be found in two ways. First, we could factor. So remember the 4 questions when we factor. We would ask, is there a greatest common factor? If not, then we'll ask, is this a difference of squares? Then we'll ask, is the a value 1? And then we'll ask, is the a value not 1? Those are the 4 questions we need to ask when factoring. Now, if we can't factor, or the numbers look very complicated and we can't seem to think of the numbers that would work to factor, we can use the quadratic formula. And the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. So today I'm going to teach you what that is and how to use it. Note, to use the quadratic formula, the equation must be in standard form. So it must be ax squared plus bx plus c. And another note, the discriminant can be used to determine whether a parabola has 1, 2, or no zeros. The discriminant is the part of the quadratic formula under the square root sign. So b squared minus 4ac, and I'll teach you how to use that as well. Okay, below that it says proving and developing the quadratic formula. So I'm going to show you how the quadratic formula was developed. You won't need to do this on a test or anything, but just you need to know this, just where it came from. So just take notes, try to understand it. If you don't completely understand what I'm doing, that's okay. That's not the point of this lesson. So just write this down and then we'll move on to the examples, which are the important part after. So if I begin with an equation in standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, I am going to essentially complete the square to begin. So I'm going to look at the first 2 terms, and I'm going to factor out an a. So now I have a bracket x squared plus b over ax, because b is being divided by a, plus c equals 0. So now to complete the square, I'll just write complete the square. I'll look at the b value and divide it by 2, square it, and then add it and subtract it. So I have a x squared plus b over ax plus b over a divided by 2, so 2a squared minus b over 2a squared plus c equals 0. Now I'm going to remove that negative term from the bracket by multiplying it by a. So now I have a bracket x squared plus b over a x plus, I'm going to simplify this term, so b squared on the top, and then 2a on the bottom is also squared, so 2 squared is 4, and then a squared is just a squared, end bracket. Now multiplying this term by a will give me an a on the top as well, so I'll have plus ab squared over 4a squared, and then plus c there equals 0. Now I can simplify this term by canceling out an a from the top and the bottom, so that will leave me with 1 a on the bottom and no a's on the top. Now my next step, I'm going to factor this bracket, and I'm going to give these two terms a common denominator so I can add them. So I will have a bracket x plus b over b over 2a squared. B over 2a is my bracket because that's what happened. That's what number I got when I divided b over a divided by 2. So that will be my factor. Just clean this up. And then to get these to have a common denominator, this here should be a negative. I will have negative b squared over 4a plus c. Now I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom of c by 4a so I can have a common denominator equals 0. Now I will have a bracket x plus b over 2a squared, and then minus b squared plus 4ac all over 4a, because I can add them now because they have a common denominator. Now my next step, I'm going to take this section and add it to both sides. But before I do that, I actually need to subtract into the bracket. Because I'm subtracting the b squared, I need to also subtract that term. So that means this one over here would become a negative. So it'll be b squared minus 4ac divided by 4a. So I'm just going to rewrite that on the next page. So now I have a bracket x plus b over 2a bracket squared equals b squared minus 4ac divided by 4a. Now I'm going to divide both sides by a to get rid of this a on this side. So these a's will cancel out. Now I have x plus b over 2a squared equals b squared minus 4ac divided by 4a divided by a would be divided by 4a squared. Now I'm going to take the square root of both sides to get rid of this squared over here. So this squared sign will cancel out the square root sign, so I have x plus b over 2a equals the square root of top over the square root of bottom, so b squared minus 4ac divided by the square root of 4a squared. Now, when I take the square root of something, I have to consider that there's going to be a positive and a negative answer. For example, if I take the square root of 9, the answer could be 3 times 3 is 9, or it could be negative 3 times negative 3 is also 9. So in front of there, I need to write plus or minus. Now, when I take the square root of this here, that's going to give me the square root of 4 is 2, the square root of a squared is a. So I'm going to have a 2a on the bottom over there. So now I have x plus b over 2a equals plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Now I'm going to subtract b over 2a from both sides. And now I have x equals, they both have a common denominator, so I can just combine those. So it's all going to be over 2a. And then I have this negative b I'm going to bring to the front. Negative b, and this part, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. And that there is the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Okay, now on to some examples. So this is on the right side of the page, examples from page 403, number 4, A, C, and E. And this is how we actually use the quadratic formula. Now that we know where it came from, we can forget that, and now I'm going to show you how to use it. So number 4a says, solve the equation using the quadratic formula. So 6x squared minus x minus 15 equals 0. So I'm going to first start by writing out the quadratic formula. So that's x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Now, in this equation here, I need to identify what numbers represent a, b, and c. So a x squared minus or plus bx plus c equals 0. So that would be standard form. So that means in this case a is 6, b is negative 1, because it just says negative, and c is negative 15. Now in the quadratic formula, I'm going to plug those values in where they belong. So if b is negative 1, and I need to do negative b, then I'll do negative negative 1. So I have positive 1 plus or minus the square root of b is negative 1 squared minus 4 times a is 6, times c is negative 15. Square root of all of that divided by 2a, a is 6. So now I'm going to simplify the part underneath the square root sign. So I'll have negative 1 squared is 1, because negative 1 times negative 1 is 1, minus 4 times 6 is 24, times negative 15, divided by 2 times 6 is 12. 1 plus or minus the square root of 1, negative 24 times negative 15 is positive 360, divided by 12. Move up here. Now I have 1 plus or minus the square root of 361 divided by 12. Okay, now, because I have this plus or minus, I'm going to get two answers from this. So my first answer is going to be 1 plus the square root of 361 divided by 12. And my other answer is going to be 1 minus the square root of 361 divided by 12. Okay, so you see how this plus or minus, now I need to split into two. One will be adding and one will be subtracting the square root sign. Now, these are exact answers. These are the two values for x. These are the two factors for x or the two zeros. In order to find the approximate value, you plug these into your calculator. 1 plus the square root of 361 divided by 12. This one equals 1.67 approximately. And 1 minus the square root of 361 divided by 12 equals approximately negative 1.5. Okay, so those are the zeros. That's what the quadratic formula gives you, is the zeros. Okay, letter C. X squared plus 9x plus 20 equals 0. So let's identify A, B, and C. So A equals 1, B equals 9, and C equals 20. Now we'll write out the quadratic formula. X equals negative B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4AC divided by 2A. And now we'll plug those values in where they belong. So negative B is 9, so negative 9 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 9 squared, minus 4 times a is 1 and c is 20, divided by 2 times a is 1. So negative 9 plus or minus the square root of 9 squared is 81, minus 4 times 1 is 4, times 20 is 80, divided by 2. Negative 9 plus or minus 81 minus 80 is 1. So we just have the square root of 1 divided by 2. Now, we know the square root of 1 is 1, so we can rewrite that. So negative 9 plus or minus 1 divided by 2. Now we'll split into 2 and do the 1 adding and the 1 subtracting. Equals negative 9 plus 1 divided by 2. Oops, not the square root of 2, just 2. Divided by 2, and equals negative 9 minus 1 divided by 2. Simplify negative 9 plus 1 is negative 8 divided by 2 is negative 4. Negative 9 minus 1 is negative 10 divided by 2 is negative 5. So the zeros of this equation are negative 4 and negative 5. All right, letter E. 5x squared minus 11x equals 0. Okay, this one just looks a little bit different because there's only two terms on the left side. So if we're going to identify what A, B, and C are, A equals 5, B equals negative 11, and C is not there, meaning it's 0. So anywhere there's a C, we're going to write 0. So the quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. B is negative 11, so negative b would be positive 11, plus or minus the square root of negative 11 squared minus 4 times a is 5 and c is 0. Divided by 2 times a is 5. Equals 11 plus or minus the square root of negative 11 times negative 11 is 121, minus 4 times 5 is 20, 20 times 0 is 0, so minus 0, so just 121. And then divided by 2 times 5, which is 10. The square root of 121 is 11, so 11 plus or minus 11 divided by 10. Split that into 2. We have equals 11 plus 11 divided by 10, and equals 11 minus 11 divided by 10. 11 plus 11 is 22 divided by 10 is 2.2. 11 divided by 11, 11 minus 11 is 0 divided by 10 is still 0. So my zeros are 0 and 2.2. The second page or the back of the page. 3 more examples. Find the zeros of the following quadratic relations. So number 1, y equals x squared plus 2x minus 9. So two numbers that multiply to negative 9 and add to 2. Nope, that doesn't work, so I'm going to use the quadratic formula. So first, let's identify what a, b, and c are. A is 1, b is 2, and c is negative 9. Now we'll write out the quadratic formula. X equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. All right, negative b is 2, so negative 2 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so 2 squared, minus 4 times a is 1 and c is negative 9, divided by 2a. A is 1, so 2 times 1. Negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 2 squared is 4, minus 4 times 1 is 4, times negative 9 is negative 36. Now remember, I did minus negative 36. That will end up being plus, all divided by 2. Negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 4 minus negative 36 is 4 plus 36, so that's 40. Divided by 2. Now we'll split this into 2. Equals negative 2 plus root 40 divided by 2, and negative 2 minus root 40 divided by 2. Now you can plug that into your calculator and get an exact answer. An approximate answer in your calculator. Negative 2 plus root 40 divided by 2 is approximately 1.16. And negative 2 minus root 40 divided by 2 is approximately negative 5.16. All right, number 2. Y equals 2x squared minus 12x plus 18. So let's identify what a, b, and c are. A equals 2. B equals negative 12, and C equals 18. Now plugging that into the quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a. b is negative 12, so negative b would be positive 12 plus or minus the square root of b squared, so negative 12 squared minus 4 times a is 2 and c is 18, divided by 2 times 2 equals 12 plus or minus the square root of 144. 4 times 2 is 8 times 18 is 144, divided by 4 equals 12 plus or minus the square root of 144 minus 144 is 0, divided by 4. So we will have 12 plus 0 divided by 4, and 12 minus 0 divided by 4 equals 12 divided by 4 equals 3, equals 12 divided by 4 equals 3. So these zeros are both the same, meaning there's only one 0 in this on this parabola, and that 0 is 3. And the last example, number 3, y equals 3x squared plus 4. Let's identify what a, b, and c are. So a is 3. b, in this case, is missing. That middle term with the x goes right in here normally. So if b is not there, that means that b is 0. And c equals 4. So quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all divided by 2a equals negative b, well, negative 0 plus or minus the square root of 0 squared minus 4 times a is 3 times c, which is 4, divided by 2 times a, so 2 times 3. 0 plus or minus the square root of 0 squared is 0 minus 4 times 3 times 4 is 48, divided by 6. 0 plus or minus the square root of negative 48 divided by 6 equals 0 plus the square root of negative 48 divided by 6 equals 0 minus the square root of negative 48 divided by 6. Okay, now if you grab your calculator and you type in the square root of negative 48, your calculator will say something like error or math error or undefined. And that's because you can't take the square root of a negative number. Because what number multiplies by itself to produce a negative number? It doesn't. You'd have to have one positive and one negative. So it's not possible. So when this happens, that means there's no zeros on this parabola. So for example, the parabola might have a vertex of something in the positive quadrant, so like 3, 3, and open up. Then it's not crossing the x-axis at all. It's still a normal good parabola. It just has no zeros because it's not crossing the x-axis. Or it might be down here, or up here, or down here. All right? So there's some homework questions that you need to do. Let me know if you have any questions, and I hope you have a good day.